Hello, I'm ED-SKaR and I've decided to do a bit of painting again. Might start doing this a bit more regularly, but I'm trying to get a half decent camera set up. And I think I've just about got something that's worthwhile, although I may need to go back and refocus it semi-regularly. Let's start by getting some water into the wet palette. I cleaned out the wet palette recently, and the sponges are clean and dry, but that does just mean it'll be a few moments for the water to soak all the way through. There we go. Curling up and then opening out. I love that. Well, I've got a few models that I might paint. I've got a little carton of them here. I've got some Gaunt's Ghost models, as you might expect, and half a Gaunt's Ghost model. And I've got some Russians, some Soviet models that I've been painting up for bolt action, including, especially this one, that the torso of which is one that I sculpted from scratch. The arms and head are from the plastic kit. Legs, I think the legs were 3D printed on this one, and then the torso and shirt are sculpted. Artillery piece missing a chunk out of that, so that's not quite ready yet. I've also got this, which I've been looking at for a while. I think I might start with this. Let's see how far I get. This is, again, Soviet for bolt action. It is a T20 Komosole. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced. Essentially an artillery tractor. So, got a tow hitch at the back for dragging light field guns and anti-tank guns. It's got literally a bench on each side, so that you can have a few soldiers sitting on there, and then driver and machine gun at the front. It's an odd little thing. I've been trying to work out what the equivalent of this in other factions would be, and the only thing I can think of is like the Kettenkrad, which is much smaller than this, or the Bren carrier, or universal carrier, which is usually, that is like a scout vehicle rather than a tractor or a tow like this is. But regardless of the history, which I will look into the history properly at some point, let's get some paint down. I think I'm going to need a spot of matte medium. So this is 3D printed and it's primed in this kind of dark green. I say dark green, it's kind of a medium but very desaturated green. And so most of the painting is already done. Spray it green, it's done, the end. No, I've got plenty of details I want to add to this. But if I can kind of fairly lightly glaze in another dark green in the right places, kind of in the corners and such. Let's move a bit more centered. There we go. Hopefully this won't be too noticeable in terms of a color separation. That's why I'm at least trying to glaze it in. Although it's kind of coming out quite thick. That's a little better, but yeah, I think it's just more water. Need it a lot thinner. Yeah, that's more what I was thinking. There we go. It's a lot richer. Maybe what I actually need is to desaturate it a bit. Let's throw in some grey. The desaturated spray paint is a lot more desaturated than maybe I thought. I mean, that is a brilliant highlight colour. Not sure if you can. Let's get. If my camera will give me. Lost all the controls on my camera. Okay, fine. I'll leave it like that then. Kind of washed out, maybe too much light. Yeah, way too much grey. Darken it with a touch of black. Brr, if I can open my black. There we go. Again, don't need much. That's getting there. Getting there. I'll be putting black over all of these corners anyway, so that's not so much of a problem. just the just trying to get the green where I want it first. I'll point out some of the, you can just about see them here and here. There's some cracks and imperfections in the hatches particularly, but also around the front here. That's because this is a 3D print and a failed 3D print technically. When this came off the printer, there was a huge hole all the way through the middle, and there was some kind of odd damage that came up through here. And I've done my best to repair it with some kind of strategic lumps of plastic and some modeling clay. And I've kind of cleaned it up fairly well, but it's far from perfect. But far from perfect is just about perfect for me, because I can paint up the damaged bits with my metallic effect, and hey presto, free battle damage. A lot of this at the back is going to be the wood of the seats. I assume it's wood. It's a good question actually. I haven't really had a good look. I would not expect the seating here to be like leather or anything. It's certainly brown. I've seen other commercial paint jobs, and it's pretty much always brown seats. But I don't 100% know that means it's wood. I would expect it to be. Outdoors vehicle meant to be used and abused. And it's literally a bench on tracks. That could certainly be wood. Would you believe it? Lol. Certainly done a lot to define the various panels and shapes, but fair old way to go, I think. As soon as I printed this, I actually found another version that was significantly more highly detailed. That's not to say that this one is lacking detail. There is detail in it. We've got kind of the front hatch that was obliterated by my failed print, but all of the suspension and running for the tracks. There is a wood plank texture. Well, more like just straight lines in it in the seating. Unfortunately, they've kind of disappeared in the layer lines. But yeah, as soon as I printed this, I found there was another better version with more detail. And I was thinking, well, This one didn't come out very well. And this is actually a free one off of Thingiverse, so it's not like I've paid for it. So I could scrap this one, maybe turn it into a piece of burned out terrain. That would be interesting, actually. And then print this other version, but once I got to actually repairing this, kind of just a piece of layering up milliput and bits of sprues, kind of sanding it flat. Put a lot of work into this now, and kind of wanted to see it through. Should probably fill in the hull underneath the tracks as well. Let's get a fairly nice blob of dark green under each of the rivets, because once I paint on the metallic effect for the rivet, this kind of darker underneath should help it stand out. And there's quite a few. I'm not sure if they're all rivets and screws or just other things. I'm pretty sure the real T20s are welded armor plates, so or at least that's what I've seen from the pictures. I haven't had a proper close look, so I might be wrong on that. Let's do these as well. If nothing else, I can just edge them and bring out that detail. Color saturation in the webcam is pretty poor. For anyone who caught my live stream last week, as equally impromptu as this one, I think. I'm using the same camera, but I've changed some of the settings around. It's nearly in focus, like you can actually see most of it, but the color saturation is not quite how I'd like it, so switch over to the other one. Quality is not as good in a lot of ways, but the color saturation is better, so it'll be worth a comparison, and then we can decide which one is best. Or rather, which one is just least worst. Which is often how it works. Pretty sure it's not meant to have these very harsh lines. Let's see there, just about see it in the reflection. Really harsh lines, and I assume, given that the angle that they're at, that those are artifacts of 3D printing. I think they might be layer lines. Which way did I print this? Pretty sure I printed it nose up. But did I put it at that much of an angle? There might be grid lines. No, they don't really match where the grid lines would have been. As well. Is that an exhaust filter? Actually, that's a good point. I haven't seen an exhaust anywhere else in here, so I wonder, is that the filters for the exhaust? Might be. See if I can find a technical specification for the T20. It's a very interesting thing. I wonder if there are many still around. I have seen a video of one of these running. I think it's a Russian museum exhibition. And they've got at least one of these in running condition, which is pretty cool. That paint smells odd. That could be a problem. Maybe it wasn't the wet palette that needed cleaning. I'll tell you whose fault that was, though. It was Ratman's fault. My co-host on the Back to the Brush podcast, who licks his brushes and then puts them in my pots. I want to do a good shading of the underneath. Let's bring in some more grey into this. That's too light. Yeah, that's about right. Maybe a little grey. Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah, so just in case anyone kind of looks at it from a fairly low angle, it's all greened in up the front and back. Between the tracks as well. Same kind of deal here. filled in as much as I need. Let's grab the other side. Let's use my other dark green. Quite a lot of dark green. I'm a fair way through my dark green, so not unjustified. Is that the right? Yeah, it's about right. Just essentially trying to get any kind of out of the way part of the hull in a darker green than the places that's more visible, because that's going to make it look more seated in the lighting of a real environment. Kind of difficult getting a brush in there, saying that. And I'm just scraping the ferrule against the tracks. I'm sure that's healthy for the brush. Yeah, this is my second line basing brush anyway, so. Hello, 40k guy. This is not a tank, this is an artillery tractor. It's a T20 Comossolette. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation, but it's a Soviet artillery tractor. It's got some benches on the side, so you can have some troops kind of riding along. Tow mat hitch at the back for a anti-tank gun, usually, although other things as well. And it's just got two crew, so it's got a driver and a co-driver with a light machine gun in the front. And this is a cool little thing. It's 3D printed. It got damaged during the print, and kind of this whole section here, this whole middle, was essentially missing in the print. And there's also some damage at the front that's still there. I glued some sprues across it and then filled it with Milliput and sanded it down. And it's passable. It's not perfect. But all of the imperfections are just going to be painted up as battle damage. I imagine it took some kind of an anti-tank hit through the front, straight out the back. It's been repaired, given a new crew, and put back into service. And it's going to get mud and rust effects over the top. So by the end of it, it shouldn't look like a bad 3D print. It should just look like a hulked, rusty machine of logistics. I think I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm done with the kind of base greens that I wanted to put on. I've got a lot of variation in it. I was saying earlier that this camera's very washed out, kind of desaturated, so you're not really seeing the range of colour. Let's get the base coat for the metallics. So for my entire Soviet army, I have made the wonderfully sensible decision to do the whole thing in non-metallic metal, which for the infantry is ridiculously easy, because you just get a very, very thin line of the barrel, the action of the rifle, and like maybe a barrel band here or there. And so you paint it grey, and then you paint, and then you black wash it, and then you edge highlight with some very light grey or maybe even white. That's it. That's all it needs. Kind of, there's not enough surface area to really to like do wet blending, to do glazing. There's just not enough space for that, and so the wash and the edge highlight is all it needs. However, on a vehicle like this, Now this is where I can make it look like I know what wet blending, non-metallic metal means. And everyone will realise that I have no idea what I'm talking about. Non-metallic metal? It's so easy, I can do it for a whole army. Ha 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 ha. And the like. Going to be difficult to get any kind of non-metallic metal effect on these tracks just because it's so difficult to get into them. Like, I'm just base coating with kind of blunt base coating brush, and it's I'm not being neat or kind of doing any effects. I'm just throwing paint around, and it's difficult to get in there. So when it comes to actual, like, a proper non-metallic metal effect, let's have a quick go. Let's just prove that I can. And I'm wondering if the camera's even going to pick this up, but let's go. Let's have a go. Let's throw in some of that, and then wet blend. Bit of an edge highlight. Smooth it out. Bit of feathering. Need more black. That is quite difficult to see, but it's not good. I may have to consider. I put a lot of super glue and baking powder I used to glue them on, so that's going to be probably impossible to get off in one go. Oh dear. The rivets and screws, there's no such difficulty here. And all the damage at the front is going to be fairly easy to access as well. So it's really just the track sections that are going to be the issue. One of those things where I really should have a good think about what I'm actually going to do is just paint everything else and then come to it at the end and think, like, well, this ruins the whole thing. Yes, the underneath. Essentially, there's two very large circular holes that were the drain holes for the resin. So when 3D printing, if you don't already know, if you printed it solid, you're going to use 10 times as much resin, but you're also going to have trouble with the actual print. It's going to be difficult because it's pulling so much resin away every single layer. So generally hollow it out, but then you need some holes to let the liquid resin out because you want to reuse that. And in this case, I've got a cracked screen on my resin printer, and so all of this material is semi-cured resin that built up, and as you kind of line it up kind of like that through, that's where the damage at the top is. And so I've taken a UV torch to it, cured it, fully cured what's visible, and then there's primer over the top as well, so it's nicely sealed away. But yeah, that's kind of a relic of how this thing was made. That kind of failed 3D print that I'm recovering. Right, once I get a few more colours on this, it might actually look fairly good. Kind of these vision ports where the kind of damage is. I've got two greys, but this grey is, as you can see, kind of lumpy and bad. This grey is not the camera. This grey is nice and new, but it's also very light, so I'll have to mix some black into it, which is no hardship really. I've been mixing this whole project, so I've actually come to a natural state of just always mixing my paint. It's become more difficult for me to actually paint with a straight paint straight from the pot color, because I always want to put in, I'm always thinking about shadow and highlight colors and shades. I need to darken this up even more. Where's my black? What I should do is actually just get a lot of each paint out, because this is, even though it's a small vehicle, there's still a lot of grey is going to end up on this model. Get a bit of a darker grey, and I want to go all the way into the kind of the damaged area. I think I actually want to go almost to a pure black in some places. There we go. That's more like it. How's that coming out? Yeah, you can see even in the shadow of the gun barrel there, nice and dark. And then by throwing in some of the lighter grey, pick out a lot of the detail. And even though this is kind of the rough edges of the torn resin while it was printing, in this case, lucky for me, it does kind of have that same torn metal look from a, certainly not a high velocity impact like an anti-tank gun, but some kind of high impact weapon. I mean, possibly not even a direct shot. It might be a fragment of some much larger explosive. too bright too quickly. I want to start picking out some of the details. There is a lot of really cool detail in this kind of this part of the failed print, which is why I didn't repair it. I was pretty set on taking my Dremel, just cutting this whole area out and then filling it with Milliput and sanding it flat, just back to how it would be originally. But I think this is the more interesting option. Let's get a black line around the vision port. Yeah. Getting there very slowly. I would say that on my infantry models, like something like this, where I'm doing a non-metallic metal on the action of the rifle and like a bayonet, and that's about it. It only takes a few seconds because there's very little actual detail there. It's just a couple of lines. But here, this is far more interesting. And so I'm very willing to spend a little extra time. Oh, that's too watered down. What I might do after this, I might do this after the... I'm going to give this whole thing a black wash at some point. But what I might do after that is dry brush some black over this whole thing to look like scorch marks. So maybe there was some fire element to whatever did this damage. So I'm coming in with just this grey at the moment, because that is giving me, it's a very light grey, so it's giving me a lot of the kind of reflective shiny highlight that you would get from kind of this torn bare metal. But what I will do in a moment is bring out some pure white and get some specular highlights, literally specks of highlights, just little dots in just the right place, kind of particularly on the corners of things. White always has a very acidic smell. And that, if you can hear that sound, and I'm not sure if you can, but that sound in the background is chavs riding their stolen mopeds up and down the roadway again. does look like a pretty gnarly scar in this vehicle's history. Sort of getting to the right effect. I'm sure the black wash will help this. And then, yeah, I think I'm kind of on track for thinking about doing a black dry brush over the top after the wash to give a smoky burned look. I kind of like that idea. Dots spectacular. I do favour dots in a lot of different techniques. And welcome, Grandpa Werewolf, once again. I use it on my camo for the Tanner Thurston only, of course. I use it on my rust effects, which I'll be doing on this in a bit, but I'm also doing some specular highlighting on this torn metal, which isn't necessarily coming out how I'd like, but it's alright. It looks closer to like torn metal than it looks like a 3D print at this point, which is an achievement in its own right. Let's move on to another part. Let's get the gun barrel, because that needs to be equally non-metallic up. That's gonna be really easy, because this is just two tubes, which I assume are a gas tube and a barrel. I would expect one of them to be the barrel, certainly. But if I can get some darker grey, and then before that's dry, come in with some lighter grey and get a wet blend. Yeah. Not quite. Let's go again. Some water. And some white. There you go, instant non-metallic metal. Not quite, not quite. Let's get some of that dark black. Let's get another stripe going down from the top. That's better. That looks more reflective. It's a bit of a glaze just to smooth it in. I think I need to go a lot whiter, a lot brighter. Yeah, that's better. That's much better. Brighter and darker. That is the trick for non-metallics. Brighter brights, darker darks. Let's see if I can get a matching highlight on the gas tube. Nearly, a bit brighter. Where was that glaze? I made up a glaze. There we go. Smooth that out. Smooth that out. Bring in some more whites. There we go. Now the gas tube should be ever so slightly darker in the highlight than the gun barrel. That's not right. The highlight should be the same value. It should be just as bright. It should be smaller. It should be thinner. Yeah, that's it. So I do need more white. But I need to make an extremely thin line of white until I can bring it up to that brightness. That's closer. That is still, I've kind of made it both brighter and larger, which I didn't want. So let's see if I can glaze it back down. Glaze the barrel as well to make that a little wider. Oh. Needs to be darker, way darker. Ooh, that is harshly dark. Let's see. That looks better. Pretty sure I said the time of mortal words not a moment ago that this gun barrel would be the quick and easy, and it has heard me and laughed at my assumption and has decided to make things difficult. Let's grab some more white. I think this white needs a good old shake. My arm's really hurting today. I had a phone call for an hour and a half, and given that I haven't been on a phone call in as long as I can remember, I'm sure I've had phone calls before, but kind of holding a phone up to my ear has done something to the inside of my elbow. Actually, both elbows, because I was switching hands. I do not do phone calls very often. The side is sort of the same. Kind of my style for non-metallics. Actually, I kind of do the same thing with metallics as well, in a way. Is the assumption that you're generally going to be looking at from the side more than directly straight down. And so if I make a highlight that looks good from kind of any of these kind of angles and looks bad from this angle, then that's fine. So I usually put a dark stripe right across the top and then very dark to the point of black along the underneath, and then I'll have one highlight at an angle here, and then another one on the opposite side at an angle like that. They'll not necessarily be symmetrical. I'd love to say, oh yes, I'm so artistic, I know exactly what angle each side would require, but it's just sort of whatever the paint decides when I put it on. As a friend of mine once said, they don't do artistic drawing, they simply give the paper suggestions until it works out what it needs to be. Yeah, that needs a bit more of a gradient. Good. And then right up into white. Yeah, that's looking good from most of the usable angles, and kind of odd from the top, but that's fine. Let's get a nice ring at the front. And some specular highlights. Yeah, non-metallic metal is easy. That was really quick. That just took 10 seconds. I've been here an hour. Saying that, I've done all of the green on this as well. Right. I do have a chip taken out of the resin at the front here, so let's do the same. Let's just assume that at some point in this vehicle's history it was involved in something that caused it some damage. Wet blend in some really dark colours for some reflections, and then some really light for some others, and hopefully that ends up looking fairly reflective. I'll tell you what, that's what I thought the barrel would be like. That was pretty much instant. And it's not 100% perfect, but it's a lot closer than it's as good as the barrel is in less than a minute. Let's see if I can ruin it. Let's get some glazes, go with that grey. And while it's still wet, some white. And right on the corner, some specular highlights. I mean, that looks better than all of this and all of that took me the last 20 minutes. And it was way quicker. Ah, there's a vision port on this side as well. So let's get that and the tow hook. And then I'll go move on to some brown. Some actually using colour. Wow. Not as convinced there. Yeah, I think that's kind of it's in keeping. Why doesn't it look as good? You can barely see it on the camera there. You can barely see anything on the camera there, to be fair. I think the transition of colour is just a little too harsh, so back to my grey glaze. Yeah, that's way more convincing. Looks identical on camera. Let's give it a bit stronger highlight and a bit of a darker. Just there and there. Yeah, that's just about how it should be. Right. Let's grab all these rivets out. Yeah, unfortunately you can only see the white in the camera. In person there's a lot more of the grey visible before it goes to the dark green splotches. Yeah. Speckle up on the other side. Ooh. I think I already based these in grey earlier. Yeah, I have. The grey's not as strong, but just get the specular highlights in. What on earth is this song and how did it get on my playlist? I don't recognise the style. It's looking pretty good. Right. There's a lot more weathering and damage that I'm going to end up doing on this, but that can wait for later on. Because firstly, I want to get back and do a completely different colour. Shock horror. A colour that's not green or grey. It is in fact brown. Let's get another coat of this brown down. This is going down very thin. I'm going to need to shake up the this paint pot as well. Oh yeah, it is ever so slightly settling. There we go. How's that? Yeah, that's more like the consistency I would expect. Let's get this other side. We've got some more kind of residual resin. Kind of this corner here. It should be a nice sharp inner corner like this, but it's kind of filled in with this extra resin because of the failed print and how that happened. But that's no real problem, because what I'll do once the painting is finished, I'm going to go in with some mud effect, just kind of splat it around. These are like footboards kind of thing, so I'll put some little specks of mud on there. I'll put some mud on the tracks, of course, as you would expect, but kind of we'll put a big blob of mud effect. Actually, should I put mud effect, or should I put a like a bag or a spare like stack of magazines? Because that makes as much thematic sense and might be more interesting than just more mud, because there'll be mud everywhere on this. That is something I shall have to think about. This print is just drinking up the paint. So I just kind of hovered my hand over and put the gun barrel into shadow, and when I saw it under shadow, I was actually looking up here at the brown that I'm painting, but my eyes saw this as reflective even though it was in shadow. That is a good sign. That means my non-metallic metal is at least fooling my own eyes. Whether it fools anyone else's is another matter. Which one is this? Just mixing a tiny bit of black in with the brown to get the separation between the seats. I think I shall need a spot more, because what I want to do is line in the planks of wood on the backboard, because they did not come out perfectly, particularly around the failed print. I'm going to have to change brush. This is not the job for a blunt base brush. This is the job for a nearly sharp mid-size brush. Not sure if that helped any. better. There's a bit of highlight going on, but that's actually just the green showing through. Try and straighten up some of this. Need to clean up along the top. Let's go in for some rust effects. Let's change it up a bit, go in a different direction. Thanks, Games Workshop, for your amazing paint pots. So I want to pick out some of the damage, but particularly the main hit on the front. I actually want to make that as shiny as possible, or rather I want to make that like shiny, fresh metal that hasn't had time to rust, whereas a lot of this other damage, and I'm just going to do some of this in just some random corners as well, just to kind of show that this machine's been around for a while. But the whatever hit the front of this thing didn't quite kill it. Well, I mean, took it out, but it's been repaired and put back into service. But all this rust is much older than the strike at the front. So what I do have, again, this is damage from the 3D print. There's a lot of this kind of odd mottled texture, just tiny lumpy bits of the 3D print that's just artifacting from the cracked screen. But if I pick out each of those with some orange, and then I'll go over the top with some silver and grey. Because just by itself this orange is way too strong, although you wouldn't know it on the camera view. some kind of, maybe here, not too strong. Yeah, that's about right. Now I can put plenty down here. This is a pretty significant failure in the print. Although a lot of this will get covered by the mud effect. Because that, the footboard, that's right where I want the mud effect. Probably should get some of the back as well. Don't want to hide it too much because I'm going to have to find each of these pieces and shine them up. Because I want to have each of these pieces of rust. I want them to look like they've been not necessarily properly taken care of, but they've at least been cleaned down, so it's not all just perfect rust. That is a decent scattering of colour. Let's switch over to some of the light grey. Make sure I've got the right consistency, yep. And just place this directly over the orange. And that almost straight away looks more like a, rather than just spots of orange, you've actually got kind of a nearly metallic look once I've put on the white and some black wash. I'm actually getting to the point where I'm nearly at the point. That was a sentence. I'm nearly at the point where the black wash is going to go on. What are we for time? We're an hour and a half in. An hour and a half. I'll tell you what. I'll get to the backwash, and then I'll put the backwash on, and then I'll cool the stream. like I said, I'm gonna hunt down all of those orange bits to get some of my silver in it. I think I've got it all. Yeah, let's go into the white. This is a song that I track that I need to use. It's always first on the list, but it's never really the right one for any of my videos. Someday there'll be a model that fits this piece of music, and I'll get to use it. Until then, it'll only show up on the random playlist during a live stream. Yeah, it's looking good. Got little speckles of orange and grey all over it to make it look like the paint's worn through and started to rust. Got this whole chunk out of the front that we've non-metallic metalled up. The tracks I haven't done. I'm going to have to think about the tracks because they're extremely difficult to get into. I may just have to panel line black and edge highlight white and kind of pretend that that's good enough. But for everything else, we're looking at black wash and then a little bit clean up afterwards, and I'll do that on another stream. Well, I'll probably finish this one off stream and I'll paint something else during the next stream. This one came in a little early. This track is Invisible and is... This track is Invisible by Vibe Tracks and is essentially my kind of theme song, as it were, at the moment. Anyone who's been watching my videos will be well aware of it. Well, now you know what it is. What I should probably do is put the cap back on this. Leaving my paints open. That's looking good on the wood. Let's see how all of this green behaves. The black wash. I'm pretty sure for my AT gun that I've painted previously with similar technique, well, essentially the same technique as this. But I used a brown wash there. So I wonder if that will make kind of an aesthetic difference, because that's much warmer in brown than a black would be. I mean, it's looking good. And the poor desaturation on the camera is actually showing that up. You can clearly see where the wash has and hasn't been. Just noticed there's some rivets around the this front armor plate. Could have sworn this was a welded machine. Well, maybe I'm wrong on that. Good grief. Need a lot more wash than I thought. Yeah, come on that. There we go. This is without even doing the tracks. This is another fun track that's popped up straight after the last one. This is Russian Dance. Russian Dance. I sort of like the idea of having a motif, an audio track associated with any of my kind of projects. I have a particular track that I try and throw in on all of my Tanith First and Only, and I will probably try and throw this track into all of my Russian stuff. It's a little bit cheesy, and I'm bad at sound design, and I'm fully aware of that, but it's either that or do nothing, and I think doing something is better than doing nothing. Yeah, the wash on the back where the massive ridges are just means that all of those ridges are very strongly highlighted. Not ideal, but like, I'm using washes on this army, and working out how to paint the 3D printed stuff in a different style would be, that's a very difficult thing. short of sanding the whole thing down. But those are really prominent ridges. I can't even see the tracks. I guess that's kind of the way my lighting's set up. Even more black wash. How much am I using? I need to scratch a line in with my nail to say I have used this much black wash on this one model. I mean, I guess again it's partly because it is 3D printed, and so the microtexture is porous, and so it's absorbing a lot of, like, even after it's been primed and it's got several layers of paint, it is drinking it in. Nearly done. Nearly done. Hopefully a lot of this can just be left with the ink wash on and doesn't need any more work. I suspect that that will not be the case, but I can hope. I do need to pick out the bolts in the assembly, and I might pick out some scratches and stuff, kind of the same way I've done a lot of the other details on this thing. Just non-metallic metal, light grey and white, black in the shadows. There we go, that's dropped. Like I said, I think I'll call the live stream there. I've been going for an hour and 45. That's a decent length of time. And I've got most of this thing done. I've heard some people say that, you know, painting vehicles takes so long and you end up covered in wash. Well, I'm ended up covered in wash. Depends on the techniques, and this isn't the best looking thing ever, but that's pretty good. I'm happy with it. I need to do the tracks and some minor touch-ups after the wash is dried, but probably pushing 3 hours maybe when it's fully complete. But that looks pretty good. If there are any questions from anyone in the chat, I can't see anyone. It says no one's in the chat, so I'm talking to myself. Amazing. But if anyone watches this after the fact, you can of course put some comments in the comment section below. While I do these videos and live streams as a hobby, it would be nice to be able to afford a new camera. So there is a donation link for your loose change. And if you think that anyone would be interested in a Russian artillery tractor and someone painting it, maybe there's someone who's interested in this, then feel free to send them a link. But with all of that said, and no comments in the live stream, I will leave it there, and I will say thank you very much to everyone who's popped by, and thank you to everyone who watches on the VOD, video on demand, like once it turns into a video. Thank you for watching. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and I'll see you next time.